Live from Sydney, 7 News with Ann Sanders.
First at 4, good afternoon. November, that's when New South Wales will be able to resume normal life, according to the Premier. 344 new cases today, 65 infectious in the community and 2 new deaths. Cases remain dangerously high as Premier BEREJIKLIAN outlined her path out of lockdown. We're set to hit 70% vaccination here in New South Wales just before November, meaning we still have another 11 weeks of harsh restrictions to go, if that estimate is correct. Live to reporter Alex Hart. Alex, parts of Sydney have been warned they could face tougher restrictions.
Yes, and 8 council areas plus 12 suburbs in Penrith are currently under the harshest lockdown rules, but they could be extended if cases continue to rise in neighbouring suburbs. Bayside, the Inner West, Burwood and Strathfield council areas were all put on notice today because of increasing case numbers. So many worrying exposure sites have emerged right across Sydney: a playground in Barbwell Valley, a bus depot in Leichhardt, nursing home in Hawkesbury, a school in Ryde, an apartment block in Walleye Creek, an aged care home in St Mary's, an outbreak to Nepean Hospital, 9 mental health patients there infected. All up, 344 new cases today, at least 65 in the community for their full infectious period. And the death toll keeps rising. 2 more people today, a man in his 90s at Concord Hospital and a man in his 30s at Northern Beaches Hospital. Given the situation is just not improving, the Premier flagged an extension of Greater Sydney's lockdown well beyond the end of August, when it is due to be lifted. She says we must get to a 70% double-dose vaccination rate, which is expected at the end of October. Even more freedom at the 80% rate, likely in mid-November. Take a look.
That's when life looks like getting back to normal. That's when we have a different approach to COVID. That's when the freedoms that we had before this outbreak are certainly going to be in place, and where we can look forward to having a normal existence. But the challenge for us is obviously how we live in September and October until we get to that double 70%.
And Alex, the virus is spreading further into regional New South Wales.
It is, and very worrying. Dubbo, the latest place on high alert. 2 confirmed cases there have forced the closure of 2 schools and the local council area to go into lockdown for a week from 1 o'clock this afternoon. Thankfully, no new cases in lockdown Armidale, Tamworth or Byron Bay, but the outbreak in the Hunter is getting worse. Another 14 cases there today. The lockdown there is expected to be extended beyond tomorrow. 2 cases also on the Central Coast are believed to have been acquired elsewhere. A man who travelled to Sydney for work has also tested positive in Shell Harbour. The Chief Health Officer furious today about a report people travelled from Sydney to Albury to get vaccinated.
I'm just appalled that people would think at this point in time that that's okay. There is plenty of access to vaccine in Sydney, and I don't see that that's a reasonable reason to travel many hours.
Clearly a very frustrating time for everyone, and we've been warned again today the numbers are likely to get worse. Anne.
Alex Hart reporting. Thank you, Alex. To breaking news, Bathurst Correctional Centre has been sent into COVID lockdown. There are reports an inmate has tested positive. Health authorities are now frantically contact tracing, with some staff and inmates forced into isolation. A man's being questioned by police after allegedly attacking a COVID testing worker. Tom Hartley is in Parklea. Tom, police are cracking down on a number of cases like this one.
Well, and police and authorities are coming down hard on those showing no care and non-compliance. They've arrested this man who came storming into a testing clinic at Dundas on Monday, filming on his phone, ranting and raving about vaccinations. He allegedly dislodged a 31-year-old worker's face mask before punching her in the head.
He then approached me abruptly. He sort of put his camera we wear face shields. He put his camera towards my face shield and actually in my face shield. He actually took 2 swings at me.
Her accused attackers with police now.
The behaviour is totally unacceptable. No one would say that there is any reason to behave like that to any person.
Meanwhile, officers investigating last month's illegal CBD protest have made another arrest, nabbing a 39-year-old man at Woonona. He allegedly threw horse manure in a pot plant at a female mounted officer. So far, more than 60 protesters have been charged. One of them was Christian Pulkownik, infamous over this photo. Today, after 3 weeks in custody, he was granted bail.
I wish it never did happen. You know, my sincerest apologies to everyone that actually was affected by it.
Further north in Byron Bay, the man who plunged the region into lockdown has now been charged for breaching public health orders. It's alleged Zoran Radovanovic, 52, from Rose Bay in Sydney, drove up to Byron at the end of last month with his 2 teenage kids without a reasonable excuse. It's understood he was inspecting several properties. The 3 of them are now in Lismore Hospital being treated for the virus.
The future court attendance notice will be served on the man at Lismore Base Hospital with strict bail conditions.
He's due to face court in a month's time. I'll have the latest developments on these stories in the news at 6.
Thousands of Sydney tradies rolled up their sleeves and got back to work today as the 3-week government ban on building work was partially lifted. Robert Avadia joins us from Parramatta. Rob, with their local economy bleeding $50 million a day, it's a welcome return.
Well, you would hardly say Sydney's construction industry is thriving right now, but at least it has a pulse as of today with the return of construction workers from those hot zones across the city where so many tradies live. Now, construction here, specifically in Parramatta, is everything right now. Parramatta Square houses the largest commercial building construction in the country. There is also building at Parramatta Powerhouse, the light rail, the local aquatic centre and also the civic centre.
Parramatta is very, very quiet, as you can see, and most of the work that comes into Parramatta, these workers on these sites. So we're extremely pleased to see them being able to come back in a constructive and safe way.
There are, of course, conditions for people to be able to enter building sites, with the need to have had at least a mixture of either 1 or 2 jabs or negative test results every 3 days. The construction industry is a largely young workforce, so there is a bit of reluctance from young people to be given the AstraZeneca jab specifically, which is creating delays, while some young apprentices might be more content to keep earning government subsidies which outstrip their own wages.
There's a bunch of carrots and sticks, and one of the carrots not to come back to work is that if you're earning more than you will on site as an apprentice, I can see some people making that decision, but it's much better for our whole community if we can get this construction sector back. 80,000 workers in Western Sydney, it's really the muscle of Sydney, and we need to get that muscle working.
The CFMEU says the return to construction sites will likely be a slow process, but that vaccination is not the only key to this. It's calling for rapid antigen testing to be rolled out en masse across the country as a screening process, especially for those workers who are reluctant to get the jab.
Melbourne will stay in lockdown for at least another week over concerns about new mystery cases in the community. Victoria has recorded 20 new infections, with a list of exposure alerts ballooning to more than 300. While in far north Queensland, Cairns has just come out of lockdown. The Sunshine State recorded 4 new cases today, all linked to the cluster in Brisbane. New cracks are emerging over the Coalition's climate policy, with Australia being urged to do more ahead of an international climate conference later this year. Political reporter Taylor Aiken is live with the details. Taylor, Barnaby Joyce is digging in.
He is, and dismissing calls for stronger action on reducing carbon emissions until he's guaranteed that jobs in the regions won't be put at risk. The Coalition's climate chaos ignited again following a new report warning of the impact of climate change. The IPCC report, commissioned by the United Nations, warns the planet is set to be 1.5 degrees warmer by 2034, leading to more intense floods, cyclones, bushfires and drought. But the leader of the Nationals says the report does not shift his view, arguing he couldn't commit to a target of net zero emissions by 2050 without knowing how the government planned to get there, the move putting the Nationals at odds with their coalition partners.
We want to look people square in the eyes and tell them how we get there and who pays for it. There's about 130 countries are signed up to net zero by 2050 at the moment. Only 14 can give you a pathway of how to get there.
Signing up to these targets, which we adhere to but other countries don't, just doesn't make any sense.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison has previously flagged it was the government's intention to reach net zero emissions, preferably by the middle of the century. But Australia will be under increasing pressure to fully commit to that target ahead of the Global Climate Summit in Glasgow in November. To do that, however, they will need to negotiate with the Nationals to reach common ground. Failing to do so may leave Australia isolated on a global stage, but so far the Nationals show little sign of giving in. Anne?
Taylor Aiken in Canberra. Thanks, Taylor. Angie joins us now with a look at the forecast. Hi there, Angie. It's been a superb day.
Certainly has, Anne. An early taste of spring with tops in the mid-20s. Even now we are still hanging on to that warm burst. It's currently 23 degrees in the city with nice warm nor'westerly winds. These beautiful conditions covered most of the state. Burke in the far west reached 27 degrees. 26 was the top at Hay. Wollongong also reached a top of 26 and a lovely 25 down the coast at Batemans Bay. That warm air mass is filtering all the way from the country's interior ahead of a cold front. But tonight, as that front tracks a little bit closer, temperatures will drop by several degrees and winds will pick up over the snowy mountains shown in yellow. That front will also bring a little bit of wet weather tonight, generally less than 5 millimetres. The only pocket where we might see more rain is the ski fields, which won't be too welcome for those hoping for nice powdery snow. No rain for Sydney. It will be settled again tomorrow, though. Not quite as warm. Details soon, Anne.
See you then, Angie. Thank you. And still to come in Sydney's afternoon news on 7, stepping down, one of America's most high-profile governors resigns over a sex scandal. Monster fires ravage Greece. We have terrifying pictures to show you. Plus, Prince Andrew holidaying with the Queen as he faces a US lawsuit. That story a little later. But first, a man tackled to the ground by police after charging Dan Andrews. The pictures are next.